Guys, what is going on, and welcome back to another video on Conqueror's Blade as we dive in to the new tier 3, the spirits. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the first name because I will almost certainly get it wrong. Anyway, kind of an interesting unit. I had a bit of a mixed experience, I'd say, with these guys so far. Initial impressions with them were kind of pretty underwhelming. There's a large number of them. The actual unit size up at 32, which is kind of nice, but they're just super fragile. 8,000 hit points, no defensive stats to speak of at all, and that kind of meant I didn't really enjoy them. However, kind of since then, I've kind of got into them a little bit more. They do actually output a pretty reasonable amount of damage, and they can actually kind of kill heroes quite nicely sometimes as well. So let's break down a little bit what the unit is and kind of how it works. So in terms of abilities, they have two abilities. They have this sort of shotgun ability where they basically fire their pikes. It fires 3 shots out. It causes damage to the enemy and can cause a little bit of a bleed effect. This I find is quite nice at killing heroes because actually the shotgun effect is quite powerful. We're sort of talking 1,500 to 2,500 damage per hit, and when there's 32 soldiers in a unit, that is quite damaging in my opinion. Then we get this thing called the Fiery Blast, which is basically a short-range flamethrower. Kind of as it says, it is very short range. I mean, it's like they stick their pikes into their enemies and then do the flamethrower. There's really no range to it at all, and it is an automatic ability. It's not somewhere where you can direct them to flame in a certain direction like you do with the Siphonari, with the proper flamethrower unit. It doesn't work like that. However, when you're sort of frontally against a unit, you've got your 32 dudes wrapped around the enemy, and then you deploy the flames. It can actually be pretty damaging. You can put down quite a lot of flame, onto the enemy. So yeah, they can kind of work both well. Both are right point blank abilities, and both are sort of automatic. You just press one, and the soldiers will go and do their thing. So in terms of veterancy line, there's basically 2 options. There's the top line, which focuses on the blast ability, the shotgun ability, and this gives you things like increased damage, reduces the cooldown, and increases the blast's shrapnel amount by 30%. So basically focus on that. And the bottom line, which is more flame focused, although really there's only sort of 2 abilities that affect the flame, which is the cooldown reduction and an ability that reduces the enemy's defensive stats, basically when you activate this ability. But you also get added soldiers on this line. So why have I gone the top line? One, I think this line is kind of nice for killing heroes, and I kind of like that. It makes it kind of a nice ability. The flamethrower really is sort of activating once in a fight, and the main benefit that supposedly the flamethrower is this defensive stat reduction, but when most units at tier 3 have no defensive stats to speak of anyway, in my opinion it's not super useful. I think you're better off just getting in and getting the damage. Yes, the extra soldiers to the unit is kind of nice, but you already get 32, and they're so fragile and die so easily. To me, having 36 soldiers, it doesn't really make any difference to how the unit performs. That's kind of not really the sort of win or loss of the unit, in my opinion. So, moving on from that, what about the doctrines? Nothing really very exciting on here. I've thrown on the one doctrine, which basically gives their flame ability slightly more burn damage, which is, well worth sticking on. The flame is quite nice. Other than that, we've just gone on assassination and breakthrough. Thrown on the assassination for that little shotgun ability, just to try and pip the amount of heroes we can kill slightly more. A bit of extra piercing damage, because piercing damage is the damage type these guys do. And of course a siege fighter, because couldn't really come up with anything else to stick on them. So yeah, an interesting unit, works quite nicely, but is quite fragile, particularly when coming up against, fire archers or any archers really. They have no shields and they are obviously very fragile. Anyway, let's hop into some battles with them. So we kick things off on a little bit of Dessau Fort. Never really have any very long battles with this unit, because they're so fragile. They tend to be get your damage before they're dead. So the enemy pushing in off the tower, I push the unit in, go for the damage buff and go straight in on the shotgun. Initially picking up a couple of hero kills, actually 3 hero kills I think in that one move. So that's how damaging that shotgun can be. We then go in, make use of our flamethrower, following up, get our 4th hero kill, push the unit through a bit more, and then try and get damage on the stuff as it's coming off the tower. And you can see the unit is running out of health quite quickly. And We've got, what, 25 unit kills, so we've not exactly slaughtered a lot, but they did manage to pick up those 4 hero kills, which is not too bad going. We could then pull the unit back out of the fight, and actually, in this case, a surprisingly large number of them survived, as I then go and basically send them back to the supply point at the back of the map, get them healed up, but I end up switching out to a different unit, and don't use them again, unfortunately, on this battle. Next up, we end up on Empyrean Sands, the slightly worse version of the Reginopolis map. We basically got the siege towers in, pushed straight up, straight on with our shotgun, grab ourselves a hero kill, and actually picking up 20 unit kills kind of early on, not doing too badly. Went on with the flames, but there wasn't actually that much to burn, so not many of the unit actually activated. And that's what I mean, they actually have to stick their spears in for the flame to basically activate. They don't just carpet flame the ground. Anyway, pushing back up on the tower, I was slightly concerned about the iron caps behind charging into us, which they do ultimately do. And you can kind of see what I mean about this unit just diminishes over time. They're a melee unit, ooh, nice bit of flames, actually picking up a few kills, but they're very fragile, so in fights like this, you know, you have to use them in combat to get the kills, but they just kind of die kind of easily. Get ourselves up to 40 unit kills, we've had a hero, 40 units, not bad really for the unit, and it was all high tier stuff. But, you know, that's pretty much the unit gone. They're so fragile, and that's kind of the biggest drawback of this unit ultimately. And ultimately, that about finishes the unit off, as I nicely back up into a unit of Prefecture Guard, just as Spartans. Finally, we end up in a little bit of Brock Estrie, a map that I basically never played during the season, but now can't seem to get away from. Anyway, enemies pushing through the choke point, go up with the unit initially, just going on with the shotgun to get a few extra kills. Kind of works reasonably nicely as we get flanked then in the back. And you see, I think the unit holds its own pretty reasonably against the unit of condos. You know, you're going to be taking losses in this sort of situation, and that's, again, kind of what I'm trying to reinforce the negative side of this unit, is it just doesn't last all that long. You know, we beat the condos, I think, pretty convincingly, but we end up getting charged by some horses who don't really do a lot of damage at all, but just sort of die. But, you know, you're sort of not really picking up any sort of great numbers of kills. But I suppose at tier 3 you have to say what unit really does. If you compare it to playing, say, a unit of condos, maybe Sons of Fenrir, you know, generally you're not really getting 100 kill games because these units are so fragile. So maybe there's arguably a criticism that isn't really justified. We do end up meeting a little bit of a sticky end though. Move in as kind of the enemy starts to push through this breach again to try and block it up, but quite a lot of stuff turns up at once. I initially go on with the flamethrower to try and sort of contain them with that, and when we get very close to getting the kill on that Nadachi, he just manages to survive, and unfortunately the unit gets wiped out. So yeah, definitely a decent unit, but aren't going to be setting the world on fire kind of with their abilities. The flame is quite nice, and the shotgun is quite nice. Flame for units, quite nice, particularly against shield units, you know, that kind of stand there not doing much damage. And the shotgun's quite nice against heroes. They are a decent sized unit, and they are quite cheap. So, in that sense, at tier 3, yeah, I think they're a middle tier unit. They hold their own perfectly fine, they're just quite fragile, and if you get shot at by any archers or ranged units, then, well, the unit will be dead before you know it. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you all on the next one.